All right, well, if that doesn't get you excited to do grit, I'm not sure what's going to. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole, and this is Koru Fitness. This is just a little presentation on the Les Mills Grit series that we are starting up here this week. First class is starting today at 5:50 or 5:40, sorry, and then tomorrow we have it a little after 6 o'clock with Jenny. I want to just give you a little bit of education around what grit is, which is actually high intensity interval training or HIIT training. So during this, we just have a quick little presentation for you. It's about 15 minutes or so. So what we're going to cover in this deal is what is HIIT. I want to explain to you the bodies in order to understand what grit is or what HIIT is. You need to understand what the body's energy systems are and how they're used. You'll understand by the end of this why it's important to push your anaerobic threshold, which is one of your body's energy systems. You'll learn about what the benefits are of HIIT with Les Mills Grit, and how to incorporate grit into your current training routine, as well as the best part of nutrition. So let's just get into it. So what is HIIT? So HIIT is a short for high intensity interval training. So it's defined, so what we want to think of is repeated bouts of like short to moderate duration of exercise. So think 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, kind of like Tabata. It's performed at an intensity that's greater than your anaerobic threshold. So, well, that sounds great, but what is this anaerobic threshold? Perfect and great question, but we need to wait a little bit before we get there. I'll explain that in just a minute, but before we get there, we need to understand our body's energy systems. So heading into our body's energy systems is that here's a little review of it. So we have two types of energy systems, the aerobic and the anaerobic. Aerobic is what we're used to, we aerobic exercise, so that's with oxygen. And we have anaerobic, which is without oxygen. So typically when we're working out, we are using our aerobic energy stores. So what is the aerobic energy system? So it uses oxygen to produce fuel for sustained exercise. So think long distance running or group fitness classes or out for a bike ride. That's when you're using your oxygen to produce fuel. And we've been told that the lower the intensity of the exercise, the more fuel that you use. So this is what we know is what's called the fat burning zone. And it's not incorrect, but it's also a little misunderstood because once HIIT was studied, or high intensity interval training was studied, that's when they found this out. So we've been told that the lower intensity exercise, the more fat you use, and that as intensity rises, you use a higher percentage of carbohydrates for fuel. So carbohydrates are stored as glycogen in our muscles, and glucose in our bloodstream. And this is why distance runners will do like carbo loading. before a race to build up their energy source. They want to increase their glycogen stores so that they can tap into that for their fuel as they go. So that's energy system number one. Energy system number two is the anaerobic energy system, which happens as energy or as exercise increases in intensity. That's when we lose the ability to use oxygen for fuel. And that's when we turn to our anaerobic energy systems. So, and there's two types of those. We're really less familiar with the anaerobic energy. So we know it means without oxygen. But what does that really mean, and how is training without oxygen a good thing? Well, there's two types of energy sources: the ATP-PC system, which is adenosine phosphocreatine, and the glycolysis system. So the first one is the ATP. I know this is really sciencey and geeky, and it's kind of one of those things that when you get into exercise science, that kind of stuff, which is kind of interesting if you're into that. And it's good to kind of understand why we do things the way we do here at Koru, and why we picked Les Mills for our group fitness partner, because they do all this research, which is fantastic for us to learn. But anyways, the ATP-PC system uses creatine phosphate to provide a very quick source of ATP, which again is adenosine triphosphate. And this system is going to provide us with about 10 seconds of energy. So if you think of a sprinter who's just going to run a quick 100-meter sprint race, that's the all-out exertion. And if we're going to break it down into what a graphic would look like, this is what it would be. So it kind of stores up energy in the body like a battery, and then it explodes. So this is what happens. It gives you 10 seconds of explosive energy. The glycolysis system, which is what converts glucose or sugar to ATP without using oxygen. So one of the things with that is that the byproduct is the lactic acid, so that's the soreness in your muscles that you feel. And this provides energy for intense exercises between 1 and 3 minutes. And this is really individual per person. Everybody has a different duration that they can go, but it's typically between 1 and 3 minutes. So I'm going to go back here to the glycolysis system quick. So steady state training uses only the aerobic training. So steady state training, marathon running, doing any kind of biking, any kind of distance stuff where you're using this, exerting energy over a long period of time is steady state, and that is going to use aerobic system to produce the ATP. But when you do HIIT training, that uses a mix of both the aerobic and the anaerobic energy pathways. So basically, when we deplete both the anaerobic energy stores, when we deplete both of those energy, when we deplete the glycolysis system and the ATP-PC system, that is when we hit our anaerobic threshold, which brings us to what is the anaerobic threshold, which was the question that we posed right at the beginning of this. So basically, everybody has an anaerobic threshold. So, and this is the point where the body moves from the aerobic energy into the anaerobic energy. So, as you start to increase your fitness, particularly when you're going to work at those high intensities, that's when you're going to improve your ability to use your aerobic energy system at higher intensities. So that means that you can go faster for longer. So think about the first time you took a body attack class. Okay, remember how you were huffing and puffing in that class and you thought you were going to die. And then you did it a couple more times and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this doesn't seem so bad. Well, it was that you were getting fitter. It wasn't that the class got easier. It's that you were getting better because you were tapping into your anaerobic energy stores and pushing that anaerobic threshold to be able to go faster, longer. So if we go ahead and we look at this diagram, you can see the diagram on the left represents somebody who has low to moderate level of fitness. And you can see that they only exercise at what would be considered a hard intensity. So that's that little, so again, we're looking at the left, the little where the blue and the red start to merge a little bit. The hard is a small area before they hit into the anaerobic zone. And that's when they cross their anaerobic threshold. and repeatedly training at that threshold, that's what starts to stimulate changes, and that improves the capacity of your anaerobic energy system. So it enables the ability to work harder before you cross the threshold. So that means you can exercise harder for longer without going into the anaerobic zone. And once you go into that zone, remember, you only have between 1 and 3 minutes of available resources to continue at that intensity. And then when you look at the person that's on the right, if you look at the diagram on the right, so that is person that what would have been perceived as training. If you look at where the blue and the red start to merge, you can see that that's a bigger space compared to the one on the left. So that means that person would have been perceived as training at a hard level of intensity previously. They can remain in their aerobic zone, which now enables them to push into the extreme intensities before they need to utilize their anaerobic threshold. So they can go hard into very hard before they tap into that 1 to 3 minute duration of the glycolysis system in the anaerobic threshold, in the anaerobic zone. So, the separation between the anaerobic and the aerobic systems it's not as linear as I've described here. Many exercises use a combination of the two. And exercise becoming classified as anaerobic is when the level of intensity dictates that most of the energy is delivered without oxygen. And again, that is the scientific geeky side of it. But, what is it and what should we do about it? Well, there's some physiological benefits to grit, which is, again, high intensity interval training. And there's physiological benefits that we are going to go over. So part of the benefits of HIIT is that you're going to get fitter faster. So again, pushing into our top training zones creates 4 physiological benefits that we don't find in steady state training. First one is EPOC, which is excess post-oxygen consumption. The second one is type 2 muscle fiber activation. We have 2 types of muscle fibers, type 1 and type 2. This one, HIIT training hits into the type 2 muscle fiber activation. There's an increase in fat loss, and there's an increase in human growth hormone. And don't freak out about that human growth hormone thing. These are all really, really good things. So EPOC, also known as the afterburn. You'll hear us talk about this quite a bit, the afterburn. And what is the afterburn? So here is a diagram that kind of explains this. So remember how I said that aerobic training is a little bit misunderstood about the research and when we're training using the fat burning zone? Well, here is a demonstration of why that information is misunderstood. So you can see that the post-oxygen consumption, or the afterburn, it's going to refer to the elevation of the metabolism after the completion of the exercise, which is required to return the body back into a normal resting state. This elevation of energy expenditure contributes to the total amount of calories that are burned with a bout of exercise. So if this is a moderate intensity exercise, you can see the downward slope. So the O2 debt and the O2 consumption in the green there, and then you can see the EPOC effect. It goes down pretty quickly. So this is a moderate intense steady state exercise. Then you add in Les Mills grit, and here is what happens. So we get a greater increased oxygen debt. The exercise time is shorter, and the excess post-oxygen consumption, or the rate at which we need to recover back to a steady state, is longer, creating the afterburn. So what that means, it basically means that you are going to burn calories exponentially up to 9 hours or more after a high-intensity interval training session. So that can be done in 30 minutes. Isn't that pretty cool? The next part that I want to get to is our type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, because everybody has these muscle fibers, fast twitch and slow twitch. The slow twitch fibers are known as type 1, and while the fast twitch muscles are known as type 2. The slow twitch muscle fibers, they're the ones that work with oxygen. So oxidatively, they work within the aerobic training, right? The aerobic energy. Whereas the fast twitch muscle fibers are going to work anaerobically. So every single one of our muscles has both of these. We have a mix of fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, with the ratio being around 40 to 60. So 40% fast twitch and 60% or 60% slow twitch. So in a steady state training, when we're doing our long distance running, our long bike rides, we are in a steady state training, or we're running on the treadmill or whatever. We're only going to be recruiting about 60% of our available muscle fiber when we're doing those kinds of exercises. When we do HIIT training, that's when we get to access our type 2 muscle fibers. So that means that we will have increased our muscle fiber recruitment by up to 40%. So what does that mean? That means that we are potentially training up to 100% of our muscle fibers in a HIIT training workout because it uses both the slow twitch and the fast twitch. So if you look at the picture, you can see the marathon runner that is on the left side has, that's somebody who's using mostly the steady state, the slow twitch muscles. And then you have somebody who's more of a sprinter, does intensity interval training on the right-hand side. So that just brings up a personal question for you of what the kind of body type structure you desire to have. Do you want to look like a marathon runner or do you want to look like a sprinter? And the reason that those bodies look completely different, why the composition is different, is because of their training method. One uses only 60% of the muscle fiber, the other one uses nearly 100%. Another one of the benefits of HIIT training is you get 9% more increased fat loss. And I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty cool to me. So exercising within the fat burning zone to maximize weight loss, that was involved from the misinterpretation of the research. So remember that what we know is that exercising within the fat burning zone to maximize weight loss, that evolved from the misinterpretation, demonstrating that a higher percentage of fat is used by the body during low to moderate intensity exercise compared to high intensity. And that the percentage of fat is known to be higher during low to moderate intensity exercise. So the rate of energy consumption and therefore the total amount of energy is much greater during the high intensity exercise. So that's this one, yeah. So you're going to be able to use more total energy during grit and after than you would in a steady state exercise. And the fat, so when you were looking again back at that chart, so that last bit's for fat is utilized for the EPOC phase for recovery, that's this. So you can see that the green line and the greater EPOC effect goes longer. And that is you burning fat exponentially after the exercise is done. So after a steady state exercise, you return to your normal resting state quite quickly. With EPOC, it takes your body extra calories to get yourself back to your resting state. So the last thing that we have is the increased human growth hormone. And this is really good because it's our human growth hormone that stimulates the muscle protein synthesis or to build the repair and the build of muscle. And it also promotes fat loss or oxidation of fat. So, any exercise we have that recruits multiple large muscle groups with sufficient intensity of brief bursts and restricted rest periods like we do in grit that elevates the levels of lactic acid, it's considered to be associated with an acute increase in growth hormone levels. And one of the bad things is, as we age, HGH levels decrease. So that makes it more difficult for us when we head into middle age to lose weight. The good news is that we can reverse it. High intensity interval training increases our human growth hormone production. So it potentially has a positive effect on being able to help us to gain our muscle and keep our muscle, gain muscle, and lose body fat. So, and studies have reported, they've done lots of research on HIIT training that it is more effective in increasing your insulin sensitivity than steady state training. Guys, it's no secret that there's, insulin. There's a lot of increase in insulin sensitivities. Insulin facilitates the uptake of glucose or blood sugar, and there's individuals out there with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and they have impaired insulin sensitivity, resulting in a reduced glucose uptake. So, when your insulin resistance plays a major part in type 2 diabetes, and it's also highly associated with major public health problems, including obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and other metabolic syndromes. So good news, it's reversible. And the good news is that we have it here and you can start as soon as today. So how do you incorporate grit into your workout? This is a big question because it's not about adding, it's about taking away, honestly. So, what happened to my graphic? Dang it. I'm missing my graphic. Well, so anyways, over here we would have, oh, there we go. Hello. So we have, if you were to work out in the morning, this is how it would look, morning and evening. So basically, if you were going to, you would replace your grit workout with your regular workout with a grit workout. So if you're a workout early morning, you can see on the left side what your morning might look like. Or if you're an evening working person who worked out in the evening, what that might look like. And these are based off of our current schedule, what we have on right now. You could mix and match what you wouldn't need to do. You wouldn't need to do grit and pump in the same day, or grit and cardio. And I know that it gets a little like, oh man, it's only 30 minutes. I need to do more. Well, that's kind of the point. And we got to get away from that mode of thinking because it's not about doing more. It's about doing less and gaining more because we are increasing the intensity of our workouts. So just quickly, I'm going to get into a little bit of nutrition here. So, how you feel your body for your grit workouts or any workout in general. And again, these are just general recommendations. So there's really no one size fits all way to eat. You guys got to find what's going to work best for you and with your belief system and whatever. And always, always, always consult your physician before you start any kind of new nutrition program. We're about food. Here we're about supplements that are going to fill in the nutritional gaps that our food doesn't give us. But there is no magic pill, wrap, shake, patch, drink. There's nothing out there that is going to give you total nutrition and fill in all those gaps. So just be mindful of the stuff that you're putting in your body and make sure that you do your research. So onto the fueling. So when we talk about nutrition, we want to think about fueling the body in 3 phases. So there's pre-exercise, during exercise, and post-exercise. So, and that you guys, this can get really complicated. So unless you're a professional athlete in training, we don't need to get really caught up in all the scientific, overwhelming, and sometimes complicated details. I'll follow this stuff. As far as I know, I don't know anybody here in this group that is looking to step on stage anytime soon or is going into any major competition where there's a lot of money on the line. We're pretty recreational, so we're going to keep it light. But there are a lot of questions, when should I eat? What should I eat? Well, one of the things that you want to do is before you work out, you want to start to increase those glycogen stores. So that's when you want to have a carbohydrate-rich meal, but it's about 4 hours before you're going to work out, about 30 to 60 minutes before. You can have a small snack. Make sure there's protein in there. Make sure that you have about 5 to 10 grams of protein, maybe about 50 carbs before you work out. And again, that's 4 hours to 30 to 60 minutes before. When you're working out, of course, you want to stay hydrated. So water is going to be the main thing that you're going to have. If you are doing a grit class, or you're doing something that's longer than an hour, I would recommend getting something like a BCAA drink, which is branched chain amino acids, or something like Advocare Biocharge or something similar like that. And you really want to avoid fats, which seems silly, but some people you might think, oh, I'll bring some nuts in case I need energy. That's not going to be the best source of energy for you because it's not going to digest in time for you to actually use it for fuel. After though, you'll want to replenish your glycogen stores to help facilitate your muscle repair. So, waiting about 30 minutes after exercise, but then making sure that you're going to, you don't want to eat right away. You want to give yourself a little bit of time, and then it has to do with hormones and all sorts of stuff. But then you have carbohydrate and protein with your meal within 2 hours. So you don't want to wait 3 hours after eating. You do want to eat afterwards because you are still burning a lot of calories, and that's when you're going to utilize the nutrients you're putting in your body the most. So an example of what you might have. So this would be an example of what to eat, before. You can see that there's protein, and then there's nutrients in the spinach, there's carbohydrates in the banana, and healthy fat in the peanut butter. You could also do almond butter or anything like that during, again, the water, branched chain amino acid drink, or an electrolyte drink like Rehydrate or Gatorade or something like that. After, so the most convenient, if you are taking off, you're working out and then you're taking off because you have a soccer game or a baseball game or something, anything that happens in the summertime, look for convenient things like post-workout recovery shakes. If you're able to do real food, a palm of protein, a fist of veggies, a cupped handful of carbs, and a thumb of fat. So that's just well balanced, and that's just good advice for any meal that you have. It says low-calorie beverage, like water. Water is always, always good. You might be looking at that like, what do you mean a palm of protein, fist of veggies? What does that look like? Well, I'm so glad you asked. So this is what that looks like. So palm of protein, a fist of veggies, which with each meal, a cupped handful of dense carbs, so like brown rice or something like that, and an entire thumb of fat-dense foods with most meals. Now, if you're going to do like olive oil or something like that, would do a little bit less than that. So, your hand is a perfect size for your body. So it doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female, because, it's proportioned to you. But, just like any kind of nutrition planning, this is just a guide. It serves as a starting point. So, please remember to just stay flexible, adjust your portions based on your hunger and your fullness, and most importantly, based off of your goals. So that's what we have for this grit presentation. So are you guys ready to do it? Should we just grit it done? So you can start as early as today. We have grit on the schedule Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, 5:40, and also that's PM, and then also Tuesday and Thursday with Jenny at